Welcome to our deep dive into cult classic films. You sent us this pretty cool article. It lists 20 movies that were completely panned by critics, but somehow became like cult classics. So
Yeah.
let's dive into what makes these movies so special, How do they go from being total flops to, like, these beloved favorites?
Well, I think the first thing we gotta understand is that cult classic doesn't just mean any movie that gets popular over time.
Right.
There's more to it.
Yeah.
It's about a movie developing like a really devoted following.
Ah.
It's often through people kind of like rediscovering the film
Yeah.
and then getting excited about it together, sharing that enthusiasm.
So we're not just talking about a movie that just happens to be liked by a lot of people.
Right.
It's more like it creates this whole community around it, almost a subculture.
Exactly. Yeah. And these films often challenge the whole idea of like what a good movie is even supposed to be. Like they can be flawed, unconventional, even intentionally bad sometimes.
Right.
But that's part of what makes them so appealing.
Yeah. And this article really highlights how harsh the initial reaction to a lot of these movies was.
Oh, yeah.
Like The Thing, which is now considered a horror masterpiece, was originally called instant junk.
It's crazy. It makes you wonder what those critics were even seeing.
I know.
Like, were audiences just not ready for something like The Thing that pushed the boundaries that much? Or was it just bad timing? Maybe the themes or the style just clashed with what people were into back then.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that can make a movie flop initially.
Oh, totally.
Like marketing disasters or just a super crowded release schedule. Sometimes critics and audiences just don't get it.
Yeah. But what's so amazing is how these films, like, persevered.
Yeah.
They found their audience often through these unconventional means, and they built this legacy that's lasted for decades.
It's true. And speaking of persevering, let's look at some of these surprise success stories. The Big Lebowski, for instance. It barely made a blip at the box office.
Right.
But then it created this whole subculture.
It did.
Dudism.
Dudism, yeah. It's amazing. When you think about it, The Big Lebowski is all about the underdog, embracing the absurd, just going with the flow.
Yeah.
And that quotable dialogue, the offbeat humor, it definitely connected with people over time.
Oh, yeah. For sure. And then there's Starship Troopers.
Oh, yeah.
Another one that critics slammed at first. And then later, it was praised as this brilliant satire
It was.
of militarism and propaganda. Really shows how a movie's reception can completely change as the culture changes and audiences get a new perspective.
Absolutely. And that shift in perspective often comes from fans who really champion these films.
Yeah.
They dissect them. They find these hidden meanings that might have been missed the first time around.
It's like these films reward you for watching them multiple times.
Oh, they do.
The more you watch, the more you notice all these little nuances,
Yeah.
the complexities, things you might not have caught on the first viewing.
Exactly. It's like The Room, for example. It's often called the best so bad it's good movie ever.
Yeah.
But people don't just love it because it's technically bad.
Right.
It's become this communal experience.
Yeah.
A celebration of absurdity where the audience really participates.
Oh, yeah. This article mentions people throwing spoons at the screen during screening.
I've seen it.
Hilarious. But it points to something deeper.
Yeah.
Right.
It does.
The Room built a whole community around loving something bizarre.
It did.
And that shared experience, even if it's making fun of the movie, it just reinforces its cult status.
The Room is definitely an outlier.
Yeah.
But it does prove that cult classics aren't always about, objective quality.
Right.
It's more about a film's power to get people passionate,
Yeah.
to create this sense of belonging among its fans, and ultimately to have a lasting cultural impact.
That's true. And then we have American Psycho.
Right.
Went from being super polarizing to a pop culture icon.
It did.
It's a film that definitely pushes buttons. But underneath all the dark humor and shocking violence, there's this really sharp critique of consumerism and masculinity.
Yeah. American Psycho is a great example of how satire can be totally misinterpreted.
It can.
Especially when it first comes out.
Right.
It takes time for audiences to unpack all those layers, to really appreciate the social commentary. And in the case of American Psycho, it found a new audience who connected with its critique of the emptiness of the American dream.
Exactly. And these are just a few examples of how these films defied expectations.
Yeah.
And found their way into the hearts of, like, devoted fans.
Yeah.
But how did they gain traction?
Right.
What actually allowed these box office flops to, rise from the ashes and become cult classics?
Well, one key factor that this article points out is the power of midnight screenings.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of these films, like The Rocky Horror Picture Show or The Evil Dead, got a second life through those late-night screenings. They turned into these interactive events. People would dress up as their favorite characters, sing along, and really immerse themselves in the movie's world.
It's really interesting how those midnight screenings created this sense of community
Yeah,
and belonging among fans.
they did.
They became rituals,
Yeah.
a way for people to connect and celebrate their shared love for these, kind of offbeat films.
Exactly. And that sense of community is so important to the whole cult film experience.
It is.
It takes watching a movie from being a passive thing to something active,
Yeah.
engaging, really personal.
Yeah. And then beyond midnight screenings, the whole advent of home video,
Right.
especially VHS and DVD, that played a massive role in the rise of these films.
It did.
For the first time, people could watch these movies again and again, analyze them, share them with friends, all outside the normal theater setting.
Right.
It gave fans the power to control how they experienced the film.
Yeah. They could pause it, rewind, dissect every single frame. It also let these films reach new audiences who might have missed them in theaters,
Yeah.
created this word-of-mouth phenomenon.
It's true. It really helped those movies gain momentum organically.
It did.
It's fascinating how technology, home video in this case, it really democratized access to these films.
Yeah.
And allowed these cult followings to grow.
It's a good reminder that the way we consume media really shapes how we relate to it.
Right.
Sometimes the most unexpected films can get their moment in the spotlight
Right.
because of new ways to distribute them.
Yeah.
And passionate fans who are eager to share their love.
Yeah. It's amazing to think about how these films, at first they were rejected, misunderstood, but over time they found new life, new meaning.
It makes you wonder, what are the seemingly forgettable films of today that might become the cult classics of tomorrow?
That's a really interesting thought.
It is.
What hidden gems are out there just waiting to be rediscovered and loved by future generations?
It's exciting to think about.
It is. It speaks to how taste changes, how cultural contexts shift, and the lasting power of movies to connect with people in ways we don't expect.
And speaking of connecting with people, let's dig into a few specific examples from this list you gave us. I'm particularly interested in David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Oh, yeah.
That surreal landscape he creates.
Yeah.
It was so polarizing at first, but it's become this cult classic among, fans of avant-garde cinema.
Oh, yeah. Eraserhead is definitely a film that you have to experience.
You do?
Not just watch. Get ready to enter this world of dream logic.
Yeah.
Unsettling images. And a soundscape that will stick with you long after the movie's over.
It's not going to be for everyone.
No.
But if you're willing to embrace its strangeness,
Yeah.
Eraserhead offers a truly unforgettable cinematic experience.
Yeah. So let's dive in and see what makes Eraserhead such a fascinating and enduring cult classic.
Eraserhead just throws you right in to this world of surrealism.
It does.
It's a visual feast.
Yeah.
An auditory feast.
Right.
It can be disturbing, but also captivating.
Yeah.
And it definitely challenges, the normal idea of how a story should be structured.
It's funny you mentioned the narrative structure, because I remember this article saying that some critics actually called it a sickening...
Yeah. It makes sense. Eraserhead really embraces the grotesque, the unsettling,
Yeah.
the darkly humorous. It's not afraid to push boundaries and really explore those darker parts of what it means to be human.
But that's what drew people to it, right?
Yeah.
It became like a midnight movie staple.
It did.
People loved its unique vision and how it was willing to kind of break all the rules.
And speaking of breaking rules, there's The Warriors.
Yeah.
Another one that stirred up a lot of controversy.
Yeah.
This article even mentions that it was linked to actual violence after some screenings.
It's kind of a scary thought, how art can sometimes reflect or even influence real life, even if it's not intentional.
Yeah.
It's a shame that a few bad apples kind of overshadowed the movie's artistic value.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. But luckily, The Warriors was able to move past that initial controversy and get recognized for its style, its themes, and its gritty atmosphere.
Oh, totally. The comic book look, the costumes, and that amazing soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
So synth-heavy. It all comes together to create this really unique world.
Yeah. And it taps into those really basic themes, tribalism, territoriality, survival, things that really resonate with people.
Yeah.
It's a film that explores those darker impulses, the ones we all have inside us somewhere.
Right. And despite the initial backlash, The Warriors actually ended up being a box office success.
It did.
And then a cult classic. It shows how powerful a movie can be to overcome controversy and connect with viewers on a visceral level.
Speaking of movies that went beyond their initial reception, there's Blade Runner. Didn't do so well at the box office at first,
It didn't.
but it's become a cornerstone of sci-fi.
It has.
So many filmmakers have been inspired by it, and it sparked countless philosophical discussions.
Blade Runner is one of those movies that you just get more out of each time you watch it.
Yeah.
The more you dig into its themes, like artificial intelligence, the nature of humanity, what it means to be alive, the more you appreciate how complex and deep it is.
And the world they created is just incredible. That dystopian city, those neon-lit streets, that mix of futuristic technology and retro style, it's all so meticulously crafted, visually stunning.
This article mentioned that critics initially criticized it for not having enough action and for being slow-paced.
Yeah, I can see that.
It seems like they wanted a more typical sci-fi thriller. But Blade Runner is anything but typical.
Right. It demands patience, contemplation, a willingness to really engage with its ideas.
Yeah.
It doesn't just give you the answers. It invites you to figure things out for yourself.
And that's what makes it so rewarding.
It
Right. It makes you ask questions, think critically about what it means to be human, and grapple with the ethical challenges that technology throws at us. It's the kind of film that sticks with you.
It does. Speaking of films that stick with you, there's the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, yeah.
It's more than a movie. It's an experience, a cultural phenomenon
It is.
that has defied all expectations and become a celebration of individuality, self-expression, and just pure fun.
Yeah.
From the iconic costumes and songs to the audience participation and the midnight screenings, the Rocky Horror Picture Show is all about community and belonging.
It embraces the weird, the wacky, the wonderfully unconventional. It celebrates sexual fluidity, gender bending, challenging social norms.
It does.
It's a movie that tells you to let loose, be yourself, and have a good time.
Exactly.
And it's incredible to think that this film, which was a total flop when it first came out,
I know.
both critically and commercially,
It's wild.
could become such a beloved and lasting cult classic.
It is.
It shows you that sometimes the films that challenge the status quo, the ones that are maybe a little too out there for mainstream audiences,
Yeah.
are the ones that end up having the biggest impact.
They tap into something primal, something that resonates with people who feel like they don't fit in, who embrace their individuality, and who are looking for a sense of community.
And those communities often form around specific films,
They do.
creating a shared language,
Yeah.
a set of rituals, and a feeling of belonging that goes beyond the screen.
Speaking of films that create communities, there's Office Space.
Oh, yeah.
It's become synonymous with all the frustrations and absurdities of working in an office.
It has.
It speaks to anyone who's ever felt trapped in a soul-crushing job.
Yeah. It's amazing how Office Space captured that feeling,
It did.
that monotony, the
Yeah.
bureaucratic nonsense, the quiet desperation.
Yeah,
It's something so many people experience every day at work.
it's true. And it does it with such a sharp sense of humor.
It does.
The satire is spot on, the characters are relatable, and the situations are both hilarious and painfully familiar.
Oh, absolutely. That scene where they take the printer out to the field and just destroy it.
I know.
Pure catharsis.
Yeah.
For anyone who's ever wanted to rebel against corporate culture.
It's like this symbolic act of rebellion,
Right.
Taking back their power, asserting their individuality in a system that tries to crush them.
And Milton,
Oh,
the
Milton.
mumbling, stapler-obsessed office drone, he's like this reminder of all the unseen, undervalued workers.
Yeah.
The ones who keep the whole system running.
Office Space is all about celebrating the underdog,
Yeah.
encouraging people to find their own path, and reminding us that sometimes the most fulfilling work is the work we do for ourselves.
That's a message that still resonates today,
It does.
especially in a world where so many people are disillusioned with the whole corporate ladder thing.
Yeah. It reminds us that there's more to life than just clocking in and taking orders.
Right. It's about finding meaning in what you do, pursuing your passions, and creating a life that's both fulfilling and authentic.
And sometimes that means stepping outside your comfort zone, challenging the status quo, embracing the unconventional.
Yeah. And that's a theme that runs through so many of these cult classic films.
It does.
They encourage us to question authority,
Mm-hmm.
think for ourselves, and find beauty and meaning in the unexpected.
Exactly. And they remind us that the journey is just as important as the destination, It's about embracing the detours, the unexpected turns, the challenges that make life interesting, and ultimately lead us to where we're supposed to be.
Speaking of journeys, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas takes you on one wild ride.
It does.
It's this drug-fueled odyssey through the American dream gone wrong.
It is.
It really captures Hunter S. Thompson's gonzo journalism style,
Yeah.
that manic energy, and his unflinching look at American culture.
It's sensory overload, a hallucinatory trip that reflects the character's drug-induced state and their disillusionment with the American dream.
Johnny Depp as Raoul Duke is just unforgettable. He really nails that manic energy.
He does.
The constant need for excess.
Yeah.
And that underlying sense of despair.
And the visuals are equally impressive, the distorted perspectives, the jarring editing, the surreal imagery. They all create this really immersive and disorienting experience.
Like you're right there with the characters in their altered state.
Exactly. Fear and Loathing challenges viewers to confront the dark side of American culture, to question how we see reality, and to think about the consequences of just letting loose without any boundaries.
It's like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But wrapped up in a psychedelic fever dream.
It is. A film that both celebrates and critiques the American spirit.
And speaking of movies that explore the American dream, albeit from a much lighter perspective, A Christmas Story offers this really heartwarming but also insightful look at family, childhood, and the pursuit of happiness during the holidays.
It's amazing how this film, which didn't really make a splash at first,
I know,
has become this beloved holiday tradition.
Yes.
It captures that magic and wonder of childhood, the anticipation and excitement of Christmas morning, and all those funny family dynamics.
The humor is so heartwarming.
Yeah.
And relatable.
It is.
From Ralphie wanting that Red Ryder BB gun to his dad's obsession with the leg lamp.
Oh, yeah.
It's full of these iconic moments that have become part of our culture.
And it works on so many levels. On the surface, it's this charming, nostalgic story about a boy's Christmas wish.
Right.
But underneath, it explores these deeper themes of family, tradition, and how time passes.
It reminds us that the best gifts aren't always material things.
Right.
They're the memories we make with loved ones.
Speaking of cherished memories, let's talk about a film that blends action, sci-fi, and a healthy dose of 80s machismo.
I like where this is going.
Predator.
Oh, yeah.
It's had sequels, a crossover with Alien, tons of imitators. But the original still holds a special place for action movie fans.
Oh, for sure. Predator delivers on everything it promises.
It does.
Thrills, spills, intergalactic action.
Arnold Schwarzenegger as Major Alan Dutch Schaefer.
Iconic.
That jungle setting, the memorable characters, and that terrifying creature design.
Oh, yeah.
It's a classic.
And that creature design, the Predator, is genuinely terrifying.
It is.
It's like alien technology mixed with pure savagery.
A great example of how practical effects can create a truly believable and immersive experience.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of practical effects, The Thing deserves a shout-out, too.
Oh, it does.
For its groundbreaking use of special effects to create a truly visceral and terrifying cinematic experience. The way those creatures transform,
I know.
Still some of the scariest stuff ever put on film.
It's amazing how well those effects hold up today.
I know.
Even with all the CGI and digital stuff we have now.
Yeah.
They have this, like, tactile quality.
They do.
A sense of weight and reality that CGI often struggles with.
They're disturbing, grotesque, and totally unforgettable. They tap into that primal fear of the unknown, of the things that lurk in the shadows, waiting to consume us.
And I think does such a good job with those themes of paranoia, isolation, and the breakdown of trust.
Oh, it does.
It gets under your skin.
It does.
Makes you question who you can trust and what might be hiding beneath the surface of even those closest to you.
Speaking of paranoia and isolation, there's Vertigo.
Oh, yeah.
A masterclass in psychological suspense.
It is.
A film that dives into the darkest parts of the human mind, exploring obsession, the slippery nature of identity, and the destructive power of guilt and regret.
Hitchcock's direction is just masterful. The way he uses color, camera work, and editing.
It is.
To create that dreamlike, unsettling atmosphere. And Bernard Herrmann's score.
Oh, so good.
One of the most iconic and haunting ever.
It is. James Stewart's performance as Scotty Ferguson is unforgettable. He perfectly embodies that descent into obsession and madness.
It's both fascinating and scary to watch.
It is. Vertigo is the kind of film that stays with you long after it's over. It makes you question your own grip on reality, the trustworthiness of memory, and what love really is.
Speaking of films that mess with your sense of reality, Videodrome is a trip.
Oh, it is. A disturbing and thought-provoking look at how technology, media, and human consciousness all intersect.
Cronenberg's body horror masterpiece is not for the faint of heart. It pushes boundaries, explores the grotesque, the surreal, and the deeply unsettling.
Yeah, James Woods is fantastic as Max Wren, that sleazy cable TV programmer. He gets obsessed with this mysterious broadcast. It shows all these violent and surreal images.
Right.
And you watch as he slowly goes mad, the lines between reality and fantasy blurring. It's captivating and disturbing.
It is, and the visuals are so effective. The body horror, the surreal images, the distorted perspectives, they all contribute to this feeling of unease and disorientation.
Videodrome forces us to look at our own relationship with technology, how much media we consume, and how those forces can manipulate and control us.
It's a film that's both timely and timeless.
It is a cautionary tale that feels especially relevant in our hyper-connected world.
And speaking of movies that really hit home, The Shining is one for the books.
Oh, yeah!
One of the most iconic and influential horror films ever made.
Kubrick's direction.
Masterful.
Jack Nicholson's performance.
Unforgettable.
And that haunting atmosphere, it all adds up to this truly terrifying and unforgettable cinematic experience.
The Overlook Hotel is basically a character itself.
It is.
It's this maze-like oppressive environment.
Yeah.
And it seems to feed off of Jack Torrance's descent into madness.
It does, just pushing him further and further down that path.
In those iconic images.
Oh, yeah.
The twins, the elevator full of blood. Here's Johnny.
Classic. They've become part of our collective consciousness.
They have. The Shining really digs into our deepest fears.
It does. Our anxieties about isolation, madness, the unknown.
It stays with you.
It does.
Haunts your dreams, makes you question what's real and what's not.
And speaking of films that question reality, Eraserhead is another one that deserves to be in this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Those surreal images, that dreamlike story, the haunting soundscape.
Yeah.
It creates an experience you won't forget.
It's unsettling.
Eraserhead is hard to categorize. It's part horror, part sci-fi, part psychological drama.
It's all David Lynch.
It is. It's a film about the anxieties of becoming a parent, the disintegration of the self, and those dark currents that flow beneath everyday life.
And speaking of films that explore those dark currents, A Christmas Story might seem like a weird choice.
Yeah.
But it actually offers a really insightful look at family, childhood, and chasing happiness during the holidays.
It balances heartwarming humor with a real awareness of the challenges and disappointments of life.
It does.
And it does it with such charm and authenticity that it's become a beloved holiday tradition.
It's amazing how all these films, despite their unusual stories, their challenging themes, and how they were initially rejected by critics and audiences, have managed to find their way into the hearts of fans and become cultural touchstones.
It's pretty incredible. They show the power of cinema to connect with us on a personal level, to challenge our views, and to remind us that there's beauty and meaning even in the most unexpected places.
And they remind us that art is subjective. Taste changes. And what might be considered bad or irrelevant at one point in time can become a classic later on.
It's all about perspective.
It is.
And it's about being open to new things, challenging our assumptions, and embracing the films that speak to us on a deeper level, even if they don't fit into neat little boxes.
And those films often have a lot to teach us. About ourselves, about the world around us, and about the lasting power of cinema.
They can transport us, challenge us, and remind us of the things that connect us all.
Well said. I think this is a good place to pause our deep dive. When we come back, we'll wrap things up with some final thoughts about the legacy of these cult classic films and what we can learn from their enduring appeal. Welcome back. We've really gone deep into this world of cult classic films.
We have. From Eraserhead to Office Space to A Christmas Story.
It's pretty amazing all these films, despite their, sometimes unconventional stories and that initial rejection from critics. They've managed to capture audiences, spark all this passionate fandom.
They have.
And earn their place in film history.
Earned it.
It really makes you think about the power of reevaluation, right?
It does.
What might be considered a flop today could become a beloved classic tomorrow.
Absolutely. It's like these films need time to kind of sink into our culture.
Right.
For their themes and ideas to really resonate.
Like a fine wine.
Exactly. They need time to breathe.
Yeah. And because of things like midnight screenings, home video, passionate fans who just love these movies,
Right.
they get that chance to find their audience.
And as culture changes, new generations discover these films.
Yeah.
They often see them in a new light. What were once seen as flaws become endearing quirks. Their bold choices get celebrated, and their unique visions are finally understood and appreciated.
It reminds us that art isn't static.
It's not.
It's meaning,
Yeah.
it's value. It can change over time.
Mm-hmm.
What's considered bad or irrelevant today could be a treasure tomorrow.
Like Blade Runner, for instance. Box office disappointment.
Oh, flop.
And now, one of the most influential sci-fi films ever made.
It's amazing how time can completely shift our perspective. We grow, we evolve,
Yeah.
and so does our understanding of art.
And it's interesting to think about how technology has played a role in this too. You know, home video, streaming services, online communities, all of it has made it easier for people to find and connect with these films.
It really has. It's like
Yeah.
that barrier between filmmakers and the audience,
Yeah.
it's not as high anymore.
It's not. Fans can engage with these films on a whole other level.
Yeah.
Sharing their takes, making fan art, even organizing their own screenings.
Yeah. It's a real testament to the power of these films. They spark conversations, inspire creativity, and foster that sense of community.
So what can we learn from all this? What do these cult classics teach us about art, about taste, about the power of cinema?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of being open-minded.
Totally.
You know, challenging what we think makes a good movie.
Absolutely. Being willing to try new things, explore different genres, give films another shot, even if we didn't like them at first.
And recognizing that there's no right answer when it comes to art.
Nope. What matters is how it makes us feel, what it makes us think about.
What connects with one person might not connect with another.
Right.
And that's okay. That's part of what makes art so interesting. It reflects all of our individual experiences, perspectives.
Exactly. These cult films remind us that beauty can be found in the most unexpected places, that there's something special about the unconventional, and that sometimes the most rewarding experiences come from challenging our own ideas.
They encourage us to embrace the weird, the wacky, the thought-provoking, even the downright bizarre.
And they remind us that a film's journey, kind of like our own journeys through life, they're often unpredictable, full of twists and turns, and ultimately they're defined by those connections we make along the way.
So as we wrap up our look into these cult classics, I want to encourage everyone to think about their own favorite movies.
What have you dismissed in the past that might be worth revisiting?
What hidden gems are out there waiting for you?
Yeah.
What films today might become the cult classics of tomorrow?
It's an exciting thought.
It is. The world of film is constantly changing.
Constantly.
Full of surprises, discoveries.
Endless possibilities.
So keep exploring. Keep challenging those assumptions. Keep embracing the unconventional.
You never know what treasures you might find.